For one reason or another, smartphones today, except for BlackBerry, do not have hardware keyboards. They're all big slabs of glass, similarly shaped, but nicely designed. Only about a decade ago, this smartphone landscape looked completely different, with things like the Sidekick LX
and the Motorola Droid
being top-tier devices. I owned a Sidekick LX from 2007 to 2008 when the iPhone was a brand new product, and I love this thing for a few reasons. Number one, and perhaps the most obvious reason, is this hardware keyboard. The Sidekick line was known for this kind of flick-out screen with a great physical keyboard. The keys are spaced out well, and although they're not super clicky, I got used to them fast and was a speedy typer. Number two, Danger's operating system, or Danger OS. The Sidekick used Danger's custom operating system, and at the time, and even today, nothing like it really exists. Nowadays, we have app grids, and the Sidekick uses this carousel layout. Yes, there was an app store or a download catalog, but it came with built-in programs, or apps, that, for their time, were pretty impressive. The Sidekick's OS was definitely ahead of its time. Oh, and this thing came with AIM. Remember AIM? Shout out to AIM. And the third thing is just the hardware itself. This thing is still so dope. Besides from flipping out and closing the screen being super addictive, this thing had physical buttons for just about everything. The trackball was clutch and made for some fluid navigation, the D-pad speaker combo was dope for the time, and it had an LED indicator. Oh, and did I mention how dope this flip out screen is? But sadly, Danger shut down its servers, so I can't get service on this thing even if I wanted to. Will we ever see the return of the Sidekick? Probably not, but crazier things have happened.
So I got the Moto Droid back in, I want to say 2009 or 2010, when the iPhone was its main competition, but this was the Android side of it. Also, I had Verizon. The iPhone was only on AT&T. I had no iPhone choice. This was my first choice. And this had all the commercials running for it. So all the I Don't, Droid Does commercials. And it was touting all the things that it could do that the iPhone couldn't, but mainly, again, because it had like a physical button for everything. It has a dedicated camera button on the top for launching the camera and taking photos. Dedicated volume rocker, dedicated power button. Google services, so a dedicated search button at the bottom. Home button, menu button, and if you don't want to use that one, inside on the physical keyboard, there's another menu button. There's a D-pad for if you want to navigate around without using the screen or the keyboard. There's a full-size keyboard, obviously, a couple extra buttons in here, but I got really used to typing on it. Use the Alt keys a lot, use the symbols a lot. This thing was really fast for me. And then of course using custom ROMs on it. You could do crazier things than you could with most other phones. You could overclock or underclock the CPU based on whether you were using it a lot or not, how your battery went. I have a custom ROM on here that has some battery tweaks, some performance tweaks. So it does kind of seem archaic and big and heavy now, but it's built like a tank. It's aged pretty well because it's still mostly metal inside. It's got this big speaker on the back. It's still rear facing, but it's big enough that if you cup it like that, you're getting a lot of volume. This was one of my favorite phones of all time. I'm glad I went with it, but this was the last phone with a physical keyboard that I ever owned.
And would you ever own a phone with a physical keyboard ever again?
I think I've sort of weaned off it, so I'm used to not having it anymore. When I first switched, I went to a Galaxy Nexus, and for a little bit I did miss having a physical keyboard, but I think at this point, I'm fast enough with a virtual one that it's all right.
So I just have to ask, when these MacBooks start shipping with glass slabs?
Well, that's a whole other thing, because there's all these keyboard shortcuts I'm used to, and I'm sure it'll be very useful. The touch bar kind of shows that, like having a custom mapping ability, but that's a whole nother step.
So smartphones about a decade ago and smartphones today, can only imagine what this space is gonna look like in 10 years from now. Thank you for watching this video. If you like what you saw, go ahead and subscribe to the channel because the next video I upload is going to be an MKBHD studio tour. Marquez, thank you as always for having me by your studio. It's always so dope to see the progression. And of course, if you don't already, subscribe to Marquez. And I always like hearing from you. What are your thoughts on smartphones with physical keyboards? Would you sacrifice your current software for decade-old software if it meant having a physical keyboard again? Do you think smartphone companies, besides BlackBerry, should be making smartphones with hardware keyboards? I'm looking forward to reading your responses, and I'll see you in the comments.